I'm gonna cry. I'm trying not to cry because I'm finishing the book right now in audio, and I had to tune in with you guys just so I could tell y'all this because I wasn't expecting to get like that emotional, and I didn't make up, so I can't be out here crying. But what's up, everyone? Welcome to my channel, Bounded and Bookmarked. I'm Jaleesa, and if you're new here, hi. If you're not new, welcome back. As always, I'm excited for today's video. It's a book review for a book that I just have my mind is just, I have so many thoughts for this book. But before I do, you already know what's coming up. If you're new to my channel and you like the vibes, don't forget to hit subscribe, you know? Check me out, let's hang out, let's have a good time. I will have my Instagram, my Twitter link below, as always. And yeah, so let's talk about this book, right? This book is called When You Look Like Us by Pamela Harris. It is her debut novel. It is a YA contemporary, and whew, a lot went into this book, and I have a lot of thoughts about some of the topics that were introduced in this book. I just think that some of this was really brilliant, you know? The book was not 5 stars for me. It was a 4-star read. This book follows Jayson and his sister, Nicole. Jayson is Nicole's younger brother. And one day, Nicole goes missing. And people are saying that the last person she was with her drug dealer boyfriend. And this entire story pretty much just follows Jay trying to find his sister, and it deals with him going to the police, talking to Javon and his friends, and trying to find as much information as he can about his sister because nobody seems to really know where she is. And so this leads me into, of course, trigger warnings. Some of the trigger warnings for this book, there is a brief reference to a sexual assault that happened in this book, but this assault is never described, so even I have no idea what happened. I just know that it did happen to a character in this book. There's talk of drug use in this book. There is a hate crime in this book. There's also just violence in general. So just to keep those in mind, let's go into the story and the writing and how I felt and the characters and all of that stuff. So I want to start off talking about my rating first of all and why I gave it that rating. So I gave it a 4-star out of 5 stars, which is pretty great, especially for someone's debut novel. I actually listened to this as an audiobook. I did not read it physically or as an ebook. This audiobook hits so much different. So I'm glad that I didn't read it physically. I mean, I'm gonna buy the book. I want the book now, like in my hand. I want it tangible, so I'm going to get it, but I'm glad I listened to it as an audiobook because some of the moments that happened in this book when they were talking and they were speaking and some of the emotions that the characters felt, I felt tenfold because I could hear the emotion in the narrator's voice. And so I got choked up a couple times in this book. I laughed a lot, I smiled, I was upset, I was very angry in some parts. So the writing itself, I'm gonna be honest with you guys and tell y'all I'm not really sure how to explain the writing style because I did listen to it, but in the best that I can, I would say the writing is very cinematic in a way. It's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue in this book, which I enjoyed because it is first person. I liked that there was a lot of dialogue in this book, and the writing was very simple. I don't know how else to say that, and I don't say that in like a negative way. I do think that because it was simple writing, it conveyed the story perfectly. I will also say the actual voice and the language that was used in the book, I also enjoyed because there were moments where things were being said from different characters. I understood, and because this is a black book and by a black author about black kids and black neighborhoods, a lot of the dialogue, it just resonated with me. It wasn't hard for me to understand or to pick up or anything. I mean, because it's language that a lot of my friends and I have used growing up or I still use today. But let's talk about the characters in this book. The characters in this book were really, really well written. Everybody in this book had such a unique personality, especially the main character, Jay. In my head, I picture him as like this younger brother who's like really sweet, really kind, but also kind of quirky, kind of dorky, trying to just be a kid. I mean, he's a kid, he's in high school. I think he's a sophomore, junior in high school, so he's a kid, you know, he's a teenager. Then we have Riley, who has a big part to play in this story. Riley is this girl who kind of has always been behind the scenes, and people don't see Riley. You know, she's there, but no one pays her any attention until one day someone does, and that person is Jay, and they become friends. And Riley's character, how I say sometimes where you have people who they walk into a room and you just know, like you can just feel their energy. You can just feel that they're a strong personality, very type A. Riley, you could tell, is very type B. She's soft-spoken, she's quieter. She still makes such a huge impact in this story and in Jay's life and in Nicole's life. And for me, I love characters written that way because it's so important to know and to make it known that people who are quieter can be just as impactful and just as powerful as someone who is front and center in the middle of everything. Then you have Javon, who is the drug dealer boyfriend. Javon's character made me feel so many things. And with Javon, you know, we get to peek into his life and see that growing up, he didn't have parents who were supportive of him or who spoke life into him. His dad told me he would never amount to anything, and so he didn't. Javon lived that life of, I'm gonna sell drugs and that's how I'm gonna get by. No real downfalls when it comes to the characters. I think they were developed very, very well, and I think even throughout the book, every main character had a point where they grew. So let's discuss some of the things that I liked in this book that I felt like were important themes. The first thing that I want to talk about is Jay and his family and Nicole, and the entire atmosphere surrounding Nicole's disappearance, how it was handled by police officers, how the public viewed it, and how they discussed it. Nicole was the kind of girl, she went to school, she had a good family for the most part growing up. Nicole would disappear, you know, days at a time, but would still come back home. When Nicole first disappeared, people didn't think it was out of character for her because she's done it before in the past. Jay does go to the cops, and he goes to a black cop, and he's assuming that this black officer will look at him and think, oh, you know what, I understand, I'll look into it further. That's not what happens. Nicole's story now becomes front page news, and when this story comes out after the interview's over, we get a clear picture of how often these stories get spun to make it look like the person brought it upon themselves. People in the comment section of this news report were talking about her and the black community and all these things, and it just made me think about all of the many times where I have seen, you know, a news article about the latest person, you know, being killed by an officer or in a neighborhood or wherever, and how in the comment section people, especially people who are not of color, especially people who are not black, and sometimes you have those two in there, but usually not as many, they go onto these news articles and they just make these very very subjective and very opinionated posts about what they think happened to a certain person and why they deserved it. I've seen so many comments on Facebook when someone is hurt or someone passes away or is killed, and people in the comment section are saying, well, they shouldn't have been doing drugs, they shouldn't have been dating a drug dealer, as if that person's life isn't valuable. There's a person's human being and their life still matters. It just shows that their life, our lives don't matter to everyone. But it's a theme that I feel like this book really handled perfectly because it's exactly how it happens. And I think that has a lot to showcase about social media just in general, not even just when it comes to black lives and black bodies and people of color, but social media, as beautiful as it is, as beautiful as it can be, it could definitely be a detriment. It could be a very harmful place. If you're somebody who sees these kind of incidents happening and the first thing in your mind or the first thought you have is, well, who were they with, or what were they doing, or were they even there? It's something to think about when you hear any story, any tragedy really. What is your first thought? And when you have your first thought, check that first thought and think to yourself, is that an appropriate response to what I just saw, what I just read? And if it's not, check yourself. Do what you need to do to put yourself in a place of empathy. So moving on, other highlights that I think that Pamela did a great job with. The first thing is consent. I've read so many YA books where one person will kiss another person and they stopped being friends because they didn't actually want that, or they didn't know how to handle that because they weren't ready for that yet. But what should be normal is asking permission to do these kind of things. Jay isn't in that girl's head. He has no idea if she'd be okay with that. So he asked beforehand and she said yes. I enjoyed that, especially in YA, because I feel like if young adults are going to read this book, people who are in high school, middle school, who are going to read books like these, we need to be normalizing that in these books. That way when they are out in the world, because you're being influenced by books that you read, and if they read that and they think, oh, I should be asking, yes, you should, both people should be asking. Everyone should be asking everything. So yes, Pamela, yes, there is this idea in the black community that men and young boys can't be vulnerable, they can't be emotional outwardly, they have to be strong, they have to be thick-skinned, they cannot cry, they cannot feel deep feelings, and if they do, they have to keep it to themselves. There was this one scene that actually wasn't Jay, it was Jay and another child in the book. There was this boy who, after losing one of his friends, he was in the hallway at school, and Jay comes up to him, he's like, I'm sorry man about, you know, so-and-so, and the guy just hugs Jay in the middle of the hallway and is sobbing. He is crying his eyes out, and Jay is just holding him, and he's just there for him. And no one says anything, no one makes a smart remark, no one makes a flippant comment. It's just a moment that happened. I think that it's great that in YA books that are showcasing black communities and black people, I think it's important to show that, yes, you can cry in the little hallway if you want to, and you can hug your friends, and it's fine, and it's normal, and it should be normalized, and it should be okay. It was a really beautiful moment. I want to briefly and very briefly go into the whole mystery of where did Nicole Where does she go? What happens to her? Of course, I cannot go in depth because that would be spoiler, and this is a very spoiler-free review, but I wanted to talk about really quick the whole scenario. I mentioned that there was a hate crime in this book, and there is a hate crime. And this crime and this entire portion of the book opens a discussion for how people who are not Black, who are not a person of color, sometimes can walk around thinking that they have the right and the privilege to do what they want and try to cover it up and just live their life as nothing happened. That part of the book was so disgusting, especially with the language that was being used. Obviously hate crimes happen and we don't always see them, but when they happen, it's like they happen to everyone who is a part of that community that it happened to. And so reading that part of the book, for me, it's really put into perspective how there are people in this world who truly think they can do what they want, even someone just hurt somebody, harm someone, and just cover it up and try to even blame it on someone else. When I went to read this book, I did not know, nor did I think that a hate crime would be a part of the story, but it definitely elevated the book in terms of writing and the storyline. But it was really gripping and it was really good. And so I'm glad that Pamela didn't go too in depth even with the hate crime itself. I'm glad that it wasn't too detailed, but it was detailed just enough to make enough of an impact, in my opinion, of course. So even though this book definitely is a book about the Black struggle sometimes, but also about how we are overlooked often by the public and by police officers when we need them, it also is a book about victory, because a lot of these characters in this book definitely find victorious moments at the end, and it was a beautiful ending. Like, I cannot tell you how happy I am, and this was not a sad ending. So I'm glad that it wasn't just a Black struggle book that we always get. It was a lot of things in one, but the end was still so bright and it still left room for hope at the end. And that is what I like about this book a lot. Like, that's my favorite part of this entire book, that it left hope in the end. So now let's talk about some things that I just think fell a little bit flat for me, because the book wasn't 5 stars, so we're gonna talk about why I didn't give it 5 stars. First and foremost, I think that maybe if I would have read it visually as well as audiobook, maybe it would have been 5 stars. I'm not sure how the audiobook affected my rating, so I will say that this story, although I think it had so many highlights, the one thing I wish I knew more of was people talked about Nicole and who she was briefly, but I would have liked to kind of get more history into Nicole's life, especially when it came to Javon. I would love to know how she even got involved with Javon to begin with, and what the relationship looked like. Who was Nicole prior to Javon, and exactly like who was she truly, not who people thought she was. I think that would have kind of made it a little bit easier for me to understand why Nicole made the choices that she made. And then the other thing was that when it came to like Nicole and Jay's parents, especially their mom, I would have loved to kind of see maybe the beginning, like a flashback of moments with their mother and how they dealt with their mom, you know, drinking and ending up in jail. Like, how did that really make them feel? I just think that talking about Nicole and Jay's mom especially, and how her being in jail affected them in their childhood and them growing up, would have made me understand how, like, who they are today a little bit better. I would have liked to understand them a little more, know them a little bit deeper. The beginning of the book was a little slow for me, and I'm not sure if it was me or if it was the book or if it was like a mixture of the audiobook and me together, but it didn't grip me in the very beginning, because I did actually DNF this, not really DNF it. I stopped listening to this book for about a week at chapter, I think like 5, and I didn't care about anything in the first 5 chapters. For me, it just didn't pull me in initially, but like I said, it still was such a great book. Overall, the book was really, really good, especially for a debut novel. So would I recommend this book? Yes, I would. I think that there's a lot that you can learn from this book, and I think, at least for me, reading it, it just, I don't know, it was heartwarming at the end. There were moments in this book where I just felt so grateful. I also felt thankful. There are moments in this book where I understood everything the characters were feeling. So many things that I just understood and I resonated with because I've been there. You know, I've been there and done that, and it really was a really enjoyable book. And I think that if you haven't read it yet, that you definitely should get your hands on it soon and read it. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this review of mine, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!